And now I would like to ask Judith Enck, EPA's Regional Administrator at Region 2, to join us for the keynote address. And just to share a little bit of a biography of Judith. Judith, on November 2009, Judith was appointed Regional Administrator of Region 2 of the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency by President Barack Obama. As Regional Administrator, she administers federal programs governing air and water pollution, industrial discharges, toxic substances, pesticides, protection of streams, lakes, the ocean, solid and hazardous wastes, the cleanup of chemical spills, and abandoned hazardous waste sites. Previously, she was Deputy Secretary for the Environment in the New York State Governor's Office. Judith also served for 8 years as a policy advisor to the New York State Attorney General. Prior to that, she was Senior Environmental Associate with the New York Public Interest Research Group. She also served as the Executive Director of Environmental Advocates of New York, a nonprofit government watchdog organization. She is a past president of Hudson River Sloop Clearwater, former executive director of the nonprofit Resource Center, and a designer of her town's recycling program. She worked with the New York State Legislature to pass a number of states' most far-reaching environmental laws, including those addressing acid rain, toxics, pesticides, recycling, energy conservation, and environmental funding. But most of all, I must highlight that Judith has been instrumental in the creation of the Puerto Rico Recycling Partnership, the U.S. Virgin Islands Recycling Partnership, and the organization and the idea to celebrate this Caribbean Recycling Summit. So Judith, thank you for what you are and all you do.
Thanks, Carmen. I'm so happy to see each and every one of you. You don't know what we have in store for you over the next 2 days. You're going to walk out of here with every piece of information you need to make your community a model recycling, composting, waste reduction community. But first things first, a commercial. Please follow us on Twitter. You can sign up right now. It's okay. You can just look away for a moment. That's our address. I wanted to tell you my personal recycling story because I was so moved by what Commissioner Dawn Henry said about her conversation with Charlotte McDevitt from BVI and how a light bulb went off. And I think when we can share this information, it gives us some direction on how to proceed. So I was a young college student in upstate New York in Albany, and I did an internship. And I remember all the college students were sitting around trying to figure out what bill do we want to work on. And there were really important bills dealing with consumer protection and health. And we got to the bottle bill. And the guy who was in charge of the internship program said, this one's going to be really hard. There's strong opposition from the beverage industry, the supermarkets. I don't know if you want to do this one. And I said, I am named after St. Jude, the patron saint of lost causes. That has been my whole professional career. So I said, let me try the bottle bill, never knowing it would change my life because, of course, the bill didn't pass the first year, and it's been around for 10 years. But the second year, we actually got it passed in New York back in 1982, and the bottle bill got millions of New Yorkers in the habit of recycling, and as has been said, recognizing that an aluminum can is a resource. A plastic bottle is a resource. A glass container is a resource. It's not yucky solid waste that you have to bury or burn. It's something that can be reused and reutilized. So that was 82, very good year. Also got married that year, and such a great wedding, and zero waste. And fast forward to 1987, because we planned everything, 5 years, baby arrives. I'm home on maternity leave, living on top of a mountain on a dirt road, no car. My husband would leave in the morning. I'm like, I'm here all day alone with a baby. What am I going to do? There was no internet, there was no computer, so I started the town's recycling program, and the baby grew up just fine. The way this unfolded was I started showing up at town board meetings and saying, we really need to start recycling. Yes, we will. We'll get to it. We have other more pressing matters. So I just kept showing up, and they knew I would come to town board meeting after town board meeting, and they said, why don't you just do it? I said, excellent. Nice idea. I said, I'm going to need a couple things. I'm going to need you to pay for the bins. I'm going to need a little very part-time staff support, and you need to print up the flyers. They said, fine. So at that point, there were very few mandatory recycling programs in upstate New York, and I didn't want to waste my time on a voluntary program, because if it's voluntary, not enough material is collected, not enough people participate, and this was before mandatory recycling was a law in New York. So I started designing the program. I got donated an old tractor trailer, not the engine part, but just the back, and we stored everything in there, and this great guy named Sid was the part-time employee who would help me with stuff, and we got big old barrels to put the glass and the metal in. We started collecting little batteries, and what are we going to put that in? So I learned that the McDonald's in the next town over, and this is not a commercial for McDonald's at all, we were vegetarians with a Happy Meal exemption. So we would occasionally go to McDonald's, and the pickles would come in these big plastic containers, and they would just throw them out. So I convinced the manager to save the plastic containers for me. All of our recyclables smelled like pickles, but that's okay. So we would collect stuff that way. The hardest thing was finding the markets. So when you're doing this in your communities, you can't get people to source separate if they don't have markets, but you guys are in great shape in Puerto Rico. You've got good markets, and they're developing in the Virgin Islands, or you could send stuff over here. But back then, it was like top secret information. A few communities had recycling coordinators, and you would call up. And so I had a former intern. So this is how the conversation went. Brian, it's Judith. You have to tell me where I can send newspaper. It was like nothing illicit about it, but we had to quietly share the information. And because he was my intern, he told me where his paper went, where his glass went. And so, this was a small town, but I got tired of waiting for the government to act. I just bugged them, and they said, you go do it. And I think that's the key to any good recycling program. You need the partnership, but you also need a well-informed resident who's really going to take it on and own it, make sure the educational information is accurate. And that's our goal for all of you over the next 2 days. I think this was then followed by, in 1988, the state legislature adopted a mandatory recycling ordinance that said by 1992, every community had to have a mandatory recycling program. So we were well on our way, and we also focused on the economic benefits of recycling. We know that recycling creates jobs. In 2007, the recycling industry employed almost 760,000 people nationwide, but not enough in the Caribbean. And we need jobs in Puerto Rico. We need jobs in the U.S. Virgin Islands. These are good jobs that some are entry level. You then go up the job ladder, and I think it'll make a real difference to have these green jobs. A recent report has shown that a national recycling rate of 75% in the United States would create almost 2.3 million jobs. And we know that recycling is one way to address the most critical environmental challenge of our time, climate change, because it saves energy. Recycling can reduce carbon emissions equal to 72 coal-fired power plants if we get to that 75% recycling rate. That's the same as taking 50 million cars off the road. So high levels of recycling are happening all over the country. California is a great example. And my question is, why not here in the Caribbean? I think people in the Caribbean care about their environment just as much as people in California. So California has recycled a lot. They've set a goal of 75% recycling by 2020. That will create 110,000 new jobs just in that state. Now, if you do the alternative, which is landfilling and incineration, you don't have that benefit of job creation. It generates the fewest jobs per ton of waste. Recycling, composting, waste reduction also saves tax dollars because you avoid having to pay tipping fees at incinerators or landfills. So you are all here because you care deeply about reducing waste and boosting recycling and composting. I really want to urge us to keep the focus on source reduction. A lot of times we zip right to recycling and composting, but the average American generates 4.4 pounds of solid waste every day. That's 1,600 pounds of solid waste per year. And think about that. I want you to take that very personally. Just you as an individual. You woke up this morning. If you're like me, you woke up late, searching for coffee. And by the end of the day, if I'm an average American, I will have generated 4.4 pounds of waste. So a family of four, 6,400 pounds per year. So we need to really keep a focus on source reduction. We know that when trash is burned at an incinerator, it can contribute to air pollution and it creates ash that still needs to be landfilled. The more sophisticated the pollution controls on the smokestack of an incinerator, the more toxic the fly ash is. Problems with landfills abound. In particular, if you've got food waste in landfills, it rots and it creates methane, a potent greenhouse gas. We know that if a landfill is not lined and if it doesn't have leachate collection, landfills can pollute groundwater. So EPA is currently closing landfills here in Puerto Rico, or if they're expanding, making sure that they are fully compliant with all environmental regulations, the same in the U.S. Virgin Islands, but landfill space should be our last resort. It should almost be like the strategic oil reserve. You want to do everything possible not to fill it up. I will admit there are some things you can't recycle, just some, like an old toothbrush. Probably not a good idea. You can think of others. So we want to preserve the little bit of landfill space for stuff like that. Another thing we need to focus on is electronic waste. Not a problem a few decades ago. Now let me be clear, because we're live streaming every session here at this conference. I am not suggesting you give up your cell phone or your iPad. I know you love your phone and your iPad more than your children in many instances. But we have to recognize that electronic waste contains chemicals and heavy metals and can be a real problem if they're not properly recycled or reused. And what's the deal with these new things coming out every year and you have to toss the old one and get a new one? I'm not against progress, but we have to make sure that we have a reuse and recycling system in place. This is almost built-in planned obsolescence. So you're going to hear a lot about paper and containers, but we also need to be savvy about what are the new challenging waste streams like electronic waste. Plastic is a challenge. Most of it is not recycled or properly disposed of. I loved the U.S. Virgin Islands commercial on your new plastic bag ban. It gave me goosebumps. It was so good and so effective. I want to steal it. And it's because 8 million pounds of plastic trash end up in our ocean every year, and it really damages the natural environment. We know that researchers are telling us that by 2025, for every 3 pounds of fish in the ocean, there will be 1 pound of plastic. Just think about that. What are we doing to our oceans? What environmental legacy are we leaving our children? That is a common picture of you catch a fish and there are little bits of plastic in it. And I'm going to talk much more in detail tomorrow on plastic in the ocean, but what happens is if a piece of plastic gets through a sewage treatment plant, or it's litter, or it's microbeads, a lot of personal care products have little microbeads in them. So it shoots through the sewage treatment plant, but let's say you even have a plastic bottle. The ocean current acts like a paper shredder. So the bottle gets shredded into little pieces of plastic, and fish eat it, seabirds eat it, and it builds up in the food chain. But I'll depress you more tomorrow on plastics in the ocean. Please be sure to come back for that one. Building on what USDA said, we have to focus on food waste. Everything our parents told us about food is true. People don't think of food waste as an environmental issue, but it is. Wasted food decomposing in landfills accounts for almost 25% of US methane emissions. And methane is a potent greenhouse gas, 25 times more damaging than carbon dioxide. Americans throw out more than a quarter of the food that they purchase. And I wasn't really aware of this, the severity of this issue, until I came to EPA, and my colleagues Dale Carpenter and John Filippelli and others educated me on the issue of food waste. Each of us waste about 300 pounds each year of food. One statistic that really stood out is American consumers throw out about a third of fresh tomatoes that we purchase at a cost of $2.3 billion. $2.3 billion a year is a lot of money to waste on rotten tomatoes. So I think the way we reach the public on the food waste issue is not just on, the horrors of methane emissions, but it's an opportunity to save money. If you prevent food waste in your own home, you save about $30 a week. A family of four, $1,600 per year. So I think families should sit around the dinner table and say, what do we want to do with our extra $1,600 a year? I give you permission right now. You can daydream. What would you do with another $1,600 per year just by avoiding food waste? So businesses and schools in the Caribbean who want to reduce their food waste should sign up for EPA's Food Recovery Challenge. Last year alone, 800 Food Recovery Challenge participants prevented and diverted nearly 691,000 tons of waste from going to landfills and incinerators. So go to the EPA website. We're working in partnership with USDA. We have an approach that you can use in your home, in your school, in your business. First, don't buy more than what you're going to use. Second, donate unused food. Third, if you can't donate it, feed it to animals. One of the most fun meetings I've ever had at EPA was with the Puerto Rico Pig Farmers Association. They wanted to get a lot of food waste to bring to farms. And fourth, you can turn food waste into something you can use. For instance, there are all these cool guys and a couple gals running around Brooklyn starting new businesses where they take used cooking oil and they use it as an alternative to petroleum. And then no matter what, don't throw it away. Compost your food waste. So if you join the EPA Food Recovery Challenge, you get free access to the EPA waste tracking software database, and technical assistance, plus access to EPA staff. So there's information on how to sign up. And again, when we can't feed people, we should feed our compost piles. Anyone who has a little bit of space in a backyard can compost. Composting is easy. I'm like the worst composter in the world, and it works. I just take it outside. We've had this little plastic bin for 25 years. By the way, if you're looking for that perfect wedding gift or shower gift, if they're very close to me and I want to spend a lot of money, I get them the bin. And then if it's like my friend's daughter, I get a lovely sterling silver, not really, but a silver compost bin to put on your kitchen cabinet, because you know, there's no reason why it has to smell if you have the right bin. So if you have a little bit of open space, you can compost. And I love the fact that in the Virgin Islands, there is the newly named Virgin Islands Resource Management Authority. I'm only going to call you that now. You are launching a new program to promote backyard composting. EPA really applauds that, and I think in Puerto Rico, we can learn on how they're doing it in the U.S. Virgin Islands, particularly how they're educating people. Caribbean-wide, there are landfills that don't meet environmental standards. So these solutions, these zero waste solutions, are absolutely imperative. I know that these are tough issues, but I think, you know, there are strategies that have worked all over the world. First, generating less waste, reuse, recycle, compost, and as I said, recycling is a climate change issue. This is such a severe issue. We need all hands on deck to solve the climate crisis. Recycling just one aluminum can save enough energy to power a TV for up to 3 hours. Isn't that amazing? Recycling 1 million computer laptops saves the same amount of energy as 3,500 US homes use in a year. So here are things you can do in your own home. Make sure source separation is done properly. Over the next 2 days, you're going to hear from experts on these different materials. Make sure your workplace recycles. I hear all the time that people recycle at home, but not at the office. That's often required in mandatory recycling laws. And really focus on public education. Recycling and composting can be fun. I'll explain him in a minute. I remember years ago, and Mark, you probably remember this, and Tony, in Rockford, Illinois, there was a guy named Captain Garbage, and he dressed up as a superhero, and it was a big suburban community, and he would go from house to house, and if you properly source separated, you won a prize. And it just created this energy and excitement. And also, if you did not properly source separate, you might get a ticket. I live in Brooklyn, and I'm constantly talking to my neighbors and those pesky Airbnb people about how to properly source separate. And what really convinced people is when the New York City Department of Sanitation gave my little apartment building a $450 fine. So I think we have to do both. We start with nice, soft education, and then it's just like if you break the speed limit, you get a fine. So this is Totes McGoats from Niagara Falls, New York. I'm not really sure what he does, except he runs around town promoting recycling. You should Google it, Totes McGoats. Kind of goofy, but in Niagara Falls, New York, the recycling rate went from 4% to 23% in just 1 year. And it's mostly because of the goat. So you all are creative, you're smart, you can talk to your neighbors, you can involve your kids, you can figure out ways to educate. It doesn't have to be a really boring brochure that sends you into a coma and scolds you. It can be a really interesting way to promote recycling, and you're going to hear from the nationwide recycling partnership that's here, and they will give you great ideas. So I'm really excited about this summit. It comes at a time when the Puerto Rico and U.S. Virgin Islands pioneering plastic bag bans are taking effect. I give tremendous credit to the legislatures in both places and the governors in both places. So you were just handed a reusable bag. You will love it. Thank you to the Puerto Rico Resource Management Authority for making them available. What I do is I leave these bags in the car because sometimes you forget. And then I've got the Chico bag in my purse, and it just becomes second nature. People who say the public won't recycle, they're just wrong. People will recycle and will reuse as long as you make it easy. There's no shortage of good ideas, but there is a shortage of leadership. Now, we already have a plan. It was sent to you. If you didn't get it when you registered, we'll get it to you. It was Mark Lichtenstein and others wrote it a few years ago. There's a sustainable material management plan for U.S. Virgin Islands, a separate one for Puerto Rico. So what often happens is when you have a good idea and you want to get rolling, some soulless person says, no, we need a plan first. And it's going to take 5 years to do the plan. We can skip that step. We've got the plan already written. So I encourage you to engage with your elected officials, call them, meet with them, send them letters, promote recycling on social media. There's some really good educational information out there. And if you think things are not happening fast enough in your community, just do it. All right? You've got all the information you need. It's really helpful to have your local government cooperating. We've got some great recycling coordinators here today. The fact that they're here means that they care. But some recycling coordinators are just like the general population. Some of them are not awesome. And so you can supplement what they are doing, or you can be your town's recycling coordinator. If you live in a big city, you're probably feeling overwhelmed. You know, I love the red recycling bins all over Old San Juan that Mayor Yulene put up. Those are amazing. San Juan's a big city, but you can take on your block. You can take on your church. You can take on your school. And if we all do it, it will have this ripple effect. I love Gandhi's quote, "Be the change you wish to see in the world." And we all have that opportunity. You're going to have lots of time to interact and talk and share ideas during the summit. We really welcome your ideas, and we hope we can come out of this summit with a blueprint on how we can all work together. You'll hear about the Puerto Rico Recycling Partnership, the Virgin Islands Recycling Partnership. There's Carmen's contact information. Call her, don't call me. She knows everything that's going on this issue. And I just want to stress we need each and every one of you to be part of the solution. You got to take this personally. It's not going to happen unless you step up. So let me just take a moment and thank everyone who worked so hard to put this summit together. You know, it starts with a great idea. Let's do a summit. And then it is a ton of work. So if they're here, please stand up. I want to thank Carmen Guerrero, the head of the EPA Environmental Division. Don Henry, the commissioner from the Virgin Islands. Weldon Ortiz from Puerto Rico Environmental Quality Board. Mari Terry Padilla from the Puerto Rico Resource Management Authority. Harith Wickrama, the Deputy Chair of the USVI Resource Management Authority, and also Island Green Living Association. Claudia Gutierrez, where is Claudia? Up there. Nothing happens well unless Claudia is involved. She's the boss of me. So thank you, Claudia, for your integral role. Grisel Diaz-Coto from EPA. Brenda Reyes from EPA, Lisa Plevin, our Chief of Staff, Dale Carpenter from EPA. I really want to thank the awesome team from the Environmental Finance Center. You don't mess with these people. They really know what they're doing. Stephanie Anderson, Lisa Ruggiero, Kyra and Melvin, Melissa Young, who could not be here today because she's having a baby this weekend. All right, well, we'll let her off the hook. Two others is I really want to thank all the presenters. Came for free on their own dime because we never have any money to do these meetings. And you will be blown away at their expertise. So every presenter, thank you so much. And finally, a heartfelt thanks to Mark Lichtenstein, who will be facilitating and who really had this idea a couple years ago of a Caribbean summit. So our dream has come true. You're all here. We're going to be friends with you forever. We are available to support your efforts, to provide technical assistance. Just looking around this room, this is a powerhouse room in terms of people who know how to affect change and people who are committed to environmental sustainability. So thank you very much.